Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need.
Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of the Project Uproar podcast. Today we're discussing success in school and what that looks like and what that really means.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this episode, especially because at this point in my life, I'm working as a teacher. So it's interesting to see what success means from my side of things, unlike the student side that I've lived for so many years.
100%. So again, it's me, Igor, and Ryan, the co-hosts, and we're going to be talking about success in conventional terms because we both have had some of that success in school. Both straight A students, both did well in university, teachers college, masters, and then we're also going to be talking about maybe some of the dangers that you should avoid when looking at school, and what, even though it seems like, we were doing well, what we were struggling with at the same time, and what a lot of students are struggling with.
For sure. And maybe at this point, I'll get into a little bit of my backstory when it comes to my relationship with the term success. So growing up, especially in elementary, but more high school, success for me meant getting good marks, acquiring those high grades. It could mean winning awards. It meant being noticed in the classroom, teachers noticing you, peers noticing you. If I always, took a class because I wanted a teacher that I thought was very talented and I wanted to learn from, I really tried my best to get noticed by the teacher at the beginning. I really thought success meant that idea of being noticed. And in university later on, in high school, my later years of high school, what success meant for me was going to some sort of prestigious university, being in a number of extracurricular clubs, the idea of having a very balanced life. It meant having a major and a minor, or even better, which I didn't do, but I knew people who did this, having a double major, being able to say, oh, I've acquired two things. A lot of success for me kind of meant acquisition in many senses. Success also meant for me being able to balance that with a large network of friends and connections. So, my idea of success, that was my idea from, I want to say later on, high school to my undergrad and university, and even parts of teachers college. And then when I went to grad school, when I did my master's, what being successful meant for me was not showing vulnerability. It meant being sure of yourself all the time. It also meant being used to using, fashionable language of academia and interactions to impress people. So it meant, being very sure of yourself, confident. It also meant always looking busy all the time. I always wanted to look busy at the beginning of grad school. It meant getting things done, assignments done, not only on time, but before their due date so I could move on to the next one. I was always in a rush, always busy. It meant focusing more on what I got from the fruit of my labor instead of the process of the labor. It meant being able to see results. And really, midway through my master's, midway through graduate school, I really had this breakdown. And I realized I couldn't continue with this pretending to be confident. And I really started to not care so much about kind of this faking it anymore, dressing up my language, performing in a certain way. Because really what I was feeling throughout my master's and even parts of my undergrad, I felt what a lot of people call imposter syndrome, which is basically when deep down you feel like you don't deserve to be somewhere. It could be you don't deserve to be in a class, in a program, in a musical group, on a sports team. And I really felt that with school. And I finally got to the point, I'm like, you know what? I don't care about that anymore. I don't care about outward appearance anymore. And what really got me rethinking success was just slowing down my life a lot. I read the famous Slow Movement book. And really this idea of slowing down my life to really live a life of contemplation and reflection was very good in terms of slowing down my lifestyle, but also in terms of what it did for my reading and writing. So I really started taking time more for my assignments, waiting until the very end of deadlines to hand in my work, even if I was finished it. I really shifted away from not caring as much about marks anymore, more about the process and learning from the process and learning from labor. And this slow movement book that I read actually was taken as an idea from one of my professors in university who co-authored with another professor in Ontario, The Slow Professor, Challenging the Culture of Speed in Academia, which this book, after reading it, I remember halfway through my undergrad, it really changed things for me. And it really helped me come to a new understanding of success. So, what it really helped me to do, and other works have helped me to do, is really get me to understand that success for me right now kind of involves resisting conventional wisdom. It means challenging some of those beliefs that we were given as kids about what success is. And I know this is kind of like a vague definition, but I think it can be applied to a number of contexts. Maybe I'll talk about it today. Really, I think success is someone who really is able to think for themselves in whatever capacity that means, whether it be acquiring a job, doing well in school. I think that's what success means, thinking for oneself and being okay with that. And Igor, I don't know if you want to talk about your idea of success. Yeah. Yours is probably a little bit different, your experience in school.
I was wondering, were you always a good student, like in elementary school?
By good student, do you mean acquiring high grades?
Exactly, yeah.
So just grades wise? I was probably anywhere from a B to an A-level student.
All right, so throughout. It's kind of from the beginning. You were like, from the beginning, a pretty good student.
Same with high school. Yeah, like B's, like, high, depending on the course, right? Anywhere from 70s to 90s, okay. B to A-level range. So when you said we were straight A-level students, I was thinking, oh, well, depends on for me.
It depends when it starts.
Yeah, it depends on the subject there. It depends on the time of my life I was in. So, I had courses and subjects that I struggled more with than others. And really, I would consider myself, going back to this idea of slow, I consider myself for some subjects like a slow learner. I remember math a lot. I had trouble with always at the beginning.
Yeah, we had the same math class. Yeah, it was fun times.
Yeah, I remember in math, I always struggled and started off a little bit lower at the beginning. But I was someone who really, I tried to put in a lot of labor, and I would finish with a decent A mark. I wouldn't finish with anything exceptional, but I would always have to work a lot to get my math mark up, unlike some other subjects in the humanities, like the histories and the Englishes. So, really for me, it depended on subject area a lot of times. But yeah, I mean, I was probably a typical anywhere from a B to an A-level student.
Nice. Yeah, so for me, the origin story, if you will, is different. I came from Serbia as a refugee with my family. And so we didn't really speak English in the beginning. I was around 5 years old. And I started picking up English here and wasn't learning it, obviously, in Serbia. So for me, English was a bit of a challenge. And I wasn't known as a good student. In elementary school especially, I got into fights. I had problems with different teachers, and just all around wasn't a model student by any means.
So do you mean right there behaviorally?
I mean behaviorally, but also grade-wise. Academically. Yeah, academically. I also got, C's regularly on every report card. Mm-hmm. Could have been D's too. Now I'm not remembering perfectly, but definitely C's pretty much every report card in earlier elementary school. And yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, I did come from Serbia. I was coming from a background where most of my friends didn't really care too much about grades. We were spending most of the day outside. So I got to the point where my mom was even worried about my marks. So she actually put me in a learning center for a while, which didn't help because I absolutely hated it. I'm a firm believer that one of the most important things you can, if you want to actually do well in school, the person learning has to actually want to learn and think it's something that's worth doing and something that can be enjoyable. And at the learning center, it was not that. It was torture. So if anything, I feel like that slowed my success down in school. But then eventually, I I did change, and it was an interesting story. It was actually because I always have a competition with my brother, like a brother rivalry, and my brother is older. He's 6 years older than me, so I was about grade 10 when he challenged me to read the Count of Monte Cristo, and he said I wouldn't appreciate it. And I read it, the whole thing. It was like 1,000 pages. And that kind of got the ball rolling for me liking reading. Even in grade 9, I didn't really like reading at that point, but the high school teacher, told me to move down to applied English, that I should move down to applied English. But I was like, no way. Like, I always had in my mind the idea of going to university because my brother did, my mom did. So I definitely wanted to stick it out, but I still didn't necessarily love it. I was just kind of pushing myself, kind of like you probably in math when you were like, taking it, working hard to get that low 80. Ended up getting an 80. So I went from, often getting C's in elementary school to, at that point, making the decision that I'm going to improve my grades because if not, I'll be moved down to applied. So from that point, I never got a final mark less than an A. And that includes high school, that includes university. But not in grade 9, in grade 10, when my brother actually convinced me to read the Count of Monte Cristo because I just wanted to show him off and like that I could read it and prove him wrong. And I feel like a lot of my success, which is not probably good, but it's proving people wrong, right? Proving that high school teacher wrong, proving my brother wrong. Like a lot of it is just fueled by this proving people wrong, which is funny. And that happened with YouTube too. I wanted to prove some people wrong. So that's always interesting. But yeah, I really ended up finishing Count of Monte Cristo. Loved it, actually. Liked it a lot and felt proud of finishing that big book. And then I felt almost like I could take on any book after that. So then I read The Three Musketeers and it kept the ball rolling. I was reading for fun, reading stuff you weren't actually required to read in school, along with reading school stuff. So that, I think, just turned into positive momentum. And yeah, I started really enjoying it. I started seeing how English could benefit me in life later on. Obviously, English is useful in the world. Like wherever you go, you could potentially teach English. So I told that to myself. So I always had a motivation. Plus, I really liked it. I always wanted to be a writer. I still want to, I write every day actually. So I'm at like 107 days of writing in a row. We were talking about last podcast that I'm writing every day, and I'm 107 days in a row. So that's huge for me as being a previous procrastinator. So now I had in my mind a vision that I wanted to be a writer. I found English useful because it could help me get a job anywhere in the world kind of thing. So I could travel. And now when that stuff clicked, when I had all of a sudden motivation, it made sense in my mind. It wasn't worthless because oftentimes if we don't see how stuff will help us in real life, we don't get motivated around it. Then I started doing really well and I started excelling I got the highest mark in my grade 12 English class, which was crazy from where I'm coming from, like grade 9, being told to move down to applied, and then grade 12, highest mark in my class. Then I did really well in university, teachers college, masters, never got below an A for a final mark. So on paper, like you said, the grades were good, but there is that other side of it where I almost went from being a bad student, like not knowing we had a quiz the next day kind of student. So like,
Yes.
yeah,
I could attest to this.
yeah, I was like that. Like I was like, what's going on? And then I shifted to actually caring, working hard on it. And yeah, so there was that big shift in me, but at the same time, it came with a price where I cared too much. All of a sudden, I started to tie my self-worth to my grades. And it definitely helped motivate me to do good. And I was scared of doing poorly. So that's like, that positive and negative motivation. But definitely I became too obsessed with getting good grades, I felt like I needed to, or else I wasn't worthy. So it got like tied into this kind of worldview, which was definitely not good for my overall self-esteem. But at the same time, so it was funny because on the surface, you're looking like, okay, that's a model student, but under the surface, I'm like, what if I fail? Like, what if I get a bad mark? Like, I was still, this is crazy. Like, you might not even believe me, but I always used to say, like, when I was doing well, right, I'm getting A's and stuff like that. I'm like, I told my mom's like, I'm like, hey, like, I might like fail. Like, if I fail, that's cool, right? Like, you're not gonna hate me if I fail. Like, I used to have to say that stuff because I was like, I wanted to make sure that people would not withhold approval. My parents wouldn't withhold love if I didn't get A's or if I didn't do well in school. So it got to a weird place that I feel like it felt personal at the time, but the more I hear other people's experiences and the more I read, I see that a lot of students are struggling with similar stress and similar like imposter syndrome, that idea also, because you at least were always a relatively good student. Since I was coming from that place where I felt like I had to prove myself, I feel like I almost even had like a greater kind of imposter syndrome where I was like, holy crap, I'm a troubled student and here I am talking with all these like kids who most of all were like throughout like good students throughout their school careers. So yeah, I definitely had that imposter syndrome too.
Yeah, I found those now just a clarification, because I know you use this term when you're talking about high school. Just for those who don't know, you were saying your teacher told you to go into applied. So in the
Yes.
Ontario system, high schools are kind of streamed in the sense that the more higher achieving courses are called academic, which was the one you were enrolled in, and then the middle one is applied for more kind of college practical bound, quote unquote practical bound students, and then the lowest one is more workplace students. So that's what he was talking about there. His teacher was kind of trying to push him down to applied, which
was a female, not important, by the way. Yeah.
Which would mean that it may have jeopardized or forced you to take more courses in the future if you ever wanted a chance to go to university. Because university, you need a university English course in high school.
And to be fair, at that point in time, if I accepted what the teacher was it would have been a pushing me to do, sure. Even it would have been a long track, but I doubt that I would have went to university, because it's not even all of the extra work you'd have to do. It's now all of a sudden you're getting used to, you're getting a self-image that is going to be hard to change later on, right? So it's going to be like whether I'd even it probably wouldn't even enter my mind if I was starting to do all applied classes to go to university anymore. So for me, I was surprised. Like, looking back, I'm like, wow, good for me. Like, I just stood up to that teacher. I'm like, no, I don't want to. Like, that's out of the question. Which, like, I could have been like, hey, this is an authority figure. I should listen to her. She knows best. So, I mean, like, it's crazy. And she was telling me this in English, and I ended up getting a master's in English, like I said, and aced it. So it's crazy. It's crazy what can happen.
I always found it was interesting, and especially university, what I remember is that I remember you doing very well academically, but there were times where, for, let's just say, an English class, and I'm just talking hypothetical here, this probably didn't even happen, but let's just say we had a Shakespeare essay due in a day, and I would have said, oh, did you read the play for the essay? You would have said, yeah, and I've read 3 of his other plays that aren't on the syllabus. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, did you start the essay? No, I haven't started the essay.
Yes.
I'm gonna start it tonight when it's due tomorrow. And I'm thinking, oh my god, like, it was kind of
and I did well.
You did well. It was it's interesting how you learned. You were kind of like, when you would encounter something in school, you would be fascinated by it and just kind of go into depth with other things that related to that topic or texts that weren't necessarily required for the course, and that would kind of take you away from the course in a sense, which I thought is interesting, because success, we think success as students mean following the instructions of a course, doing the requirements to get a good grade, but a lot of students don't try to deviate from that and go their own path in their learning at university, because there's just so many expectations. So I found that was an interesting pattern, in your undergrad was that you were just fascinated by these different topics, and you would kind of stray away from the syllabus, and then all of a sudden you'd be like, oh my goodness, I got something to do the next day.
And to be honest, like it was procrastination too, and like I heard that the most noble form of procrastination is reading. So like I was definitely I could always justify my procrastination by doing arguably productive things like reading more about that essay I'm going to write. But yes, it's like I was almost scared to like write if it doesn't turn out well. But then I'd eventually get to the point where I had to start writing, and then I'd work through that fear of like doing poorly. But yeah, well, if just in general writing, I've learned now that just start and you can always edit it later, right? The worst part is not starting and knowing you have an essay due in the morning and you haven't started at 9 p.m. and you're like, holy crap, this is bad. And it's like, it's most people from what I hear can't do good in that situation. I ended up getting solid marks, but it wasn't worth the stress. And I also got solid marks later when I conquered it later on in university, especially my master's. I got over it, and I actually was one of the first to finish my thesis, which was awesome. But when I got over it, I got good marks and without the unnecessary stress. And I was more like, okay, now I did everything I possibly could. So it definitely wasn't like this weird key to my success. It was just added stress to my life, procrastinating. And you ask, what was success? And I also told you that for me, well, Ryan knows this, I took an extra year because I had that option. Not everyone has the option, but I took an extra year in undergrad because first year I did well, I got all A's, but I felt like there was way too much. And I really loved at that point English. I loved school. And I was like, I'm not giving this a fair shake. I'm not being able to get in depth with these books. Some of them, obviously, Ryan, you probably did this too. You didn't finish all the books, right? Sometimes you have to like prioritize. Sometimes you're like, I have an essay on this. I only have a seminar talk on this, and I'm not even presenting, so I can't like prioritize that. So you kind of like skim it, but you don't really like give it the justice it deserves. So as a result, instead of 5 courses, the following years I decided to take 4, and that was good. That was much more my pace, and I could take it at my pace. I could do other stuff because I'm the kind of person that does have interests outside, like self-development stuff, like running. Like I have stuff I really like to do, and when I can't do it, I start to feel like pretty bad. So it was important for me to get in those other stuff outside of school, a break from school. And I even got to take extra courses, which probably very few students do, but I took extra courses I didn't even need to take, but just because I was interested in them. So I had that option because I took that extra year in undergrad. So that was pretty awesome. And success, I'd say, is doing it your own way. That's what I think why I was in general successful, even though there was definitely moments of stress at school. Overall, I really enjoyed the experience, and I think it was a successful experience, mainly because I did it my own way. I took that extra year to enjoy it more fully, to have time for, dates, social experiences. You don't want it all to be just, essays and stuff like that. And I also picked something I really wanted to do. Like a lot of people, and it's in the book we read, Excellent Sheep. A lot of people are forced by their parents' pressure to get a job that will kind of bring success to them, or like not even what is success, but like financial success in theory, right? It's not even guaranteed, but some jobs like doctors, like lawyers, and he says it in the actual book, liberal arts became like a put down. And there was when he did the book, less than 3% of people were taking English majors at the time. And it's because it's viewed as not a viable option because it doesn't necessarily lead to financial success. And for me, that never crossed my mind. So I picked something that I really wanted to do, that I was passionate about, which was English. And I feel like that was one of the main reasons that I was so successful, because I knew I was there because I wanted to be there. I picked to be there, and I was loving lecture. I was loving seminars. I was loving talking about the ideas, the literature. And that, I don't think I would have been able to be as successful as possible, get as many awards as I did, if I picked something that my parents wanted me to pick, or if I picked something that society was pressuring me to pick. I just picked something I loved, and I think that was the best decision I ever made.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting how I listened to, especially, I worked in high school, listening to a lot of either parents or students talking. And a lot of times they say, well, what are you going to study next year? Talking to grade 12s. Oh, I'm going to study X subject because I'm going to get this job. It's never, I want to study this subject because I absolutely love this field. And I just love the idea of just learning more about it, right? So, yeah, I mean, there's this idea of, I think now, which the book Igor's referring to, and I'm going to butcher his last name, William Dershowitz, his book Excellent Sheep, where he talks about, when it was published, which was a few years back, when he did he looked at different surveys and studies, a lot of them said that students are going to university because more than anything else, they want a job. And really only like in the 60s and 70s, not that far back, the main reason people went to university was to develop the self. So it's just been such a major 180 in the reason why people go to university now compared to just a few decades ago. So it's crazy how now it's for credentializing. Now it's for really marketing yourself so you could work someplace in the economy. Whereas before it was about developing yourself as a person. If a job came out of it, If not, it didn't happen. So I mean, the book Excellent Sheep is interesting because, just like the title suggests, the author positions a lot of students, as in the position of sheep. So what they're really good at doing, and even myself, I think looking back, especially in the undergrad, I was really good at jumping through hoops, right? Not necessarily kind of like what you did. I remember at the time when you decided to take the extra year, at first I was thinking like, why is he doing this? Like, he's not doing what he's supposed to do, right? He's not jumping to the next hoop. He's staying at that same, I was thinking in my mind, he's staying stationary and waiting next year to go to the next hoop. And I, didn't really think of it the way that you thought of it. So, what the book's talking about is a lot of students more than ever are just trying to follow existing paths that look the same. It's kind of this idea of, I remember when I was in university and when I had to sometimes wait in the registrar's office to pick up transcripts or some other documentation, and the person on the PA system would say, "Next customer, please." Not next student, next person, next customer, referring to us as customers, which, a lot of students think of themselves as customers. I'm buying this degree and I want to get this product out of this job, right? And it's like, education has become more than a business than ever. And really what the book suggests is that education isn't something that you like consume like a product, but it's something that you give yourself over to. And really what college does is it teaches you how to think, and it offers you a pause. It should.
Right. Yeah.
It offers you this pause before adulthood begins. And really, it really teaches you, if, you have a transformative education and you have great professors and you really put a lot of effort into it, it teaches you, it first gets you to unlearn some things, unlearn some habits, unlearn some ways of thought that were kind of programmed into you in high school and prior, and it gets you to relearn other things. It's kind of like soul making in a way, right? We develop our intellect, emotional self, and the whole being, and offers this space to reflect and really change as a person. So like, I think of it like the college is kind of like this pilgrimage that we go on that we don't necessarily know when it may be over. It may take longer, it may be shorter, but it really is this kind of journey that is this journey before going into the quote unquote real world of work or whatever have you, right? It offers this pause, and sometimes some pauses are a lot longer than others if you go through more university, or if you just go through a short, couple year program. But I really like to think of college or university as this pilgrimage process, where it's really trying to get to know yourself. But unfortunately, and a lot of it for myself even, I mean, I found it transformative, but there were other parts where I looked at it kind of as, at times, this business that I expected after getting my degrees to get some sort of job in my field, whatever that may be. And I mean, looking back, I regret thinking that way at times. I didn't think of it all the time like that, but it's inevitable. Like, universities are advertising more than ever. They're creating new, they're offering new programs and new kind of facilities on campus to draw people in. Not necessarily for them to be critical thinkers, but for them to, just get drawn in and spend their money. So it is becoming more business-like, but, I know there is good work going on in universities, because I definitely, I definitely was changed with many of my professors and many people, TAs, and many just, there were times I was just transformed by just having conversations with fellow students, or just with, when I was doing my master's, with my own students, right? Them telling me something that, wow, like, really got me thinking. So I know good work is still going on, but yeah, I think more than ever, university is becoming a means to an end, and that end is a job. And hopefully it shouldn't only be thought of in that way.
Yeah, that you brought up a lot there, and there's a lot that we could expand on. But yeah, I want to talk about a specific quote where we're told that now, in the book, he says, society equates virtue, dignity, and happiness with material success. And that universities are kind of promoting that idea too, that everything is a material success. And he suggests for the goal of a university to be to come out and knowing how to live more alertly, responsibly, freely, more fully, and it will send you away into the real world, if you want to call it that, with bearing questions and not resumes. And I feel like that's the perfect thing. Like, that's the main thing I got from university, which I feel like is invaluable. I got that time to think. I got to meet professors that got me thinking. I got to meet, in a different way, philosophers that are dead now, but that share some like mind-opening ideas that I got. And it made me question, it's not like a stepping stone, like how do I get to where I want to go necessarily, because that constantly changed for me. Like, unlike you, I wasn't like, this is kind of to become a teacher. I wasn't ever sure completely what I wanted to do. I just followed my passion for English. So I knew I wanted to be a writer. I thought maybe I'll be a teacher. Maybe I'll go to Japan, teach for a while, right? So that was a plan for a while. And then I ended up, the YouTube started taking off, and I focused on that more. But yeah, like what was really cool about it is it's not that it prepared me for a specific job. It's that it made me ask myself what is worth doing. So it wasn't like, okay, everybody knows what's worth doing. Making money is what's worth doing. And now this is a stepping stone for doing that. It actually made me question all these philosophers and stuff. Like, what do I want out of life? What do I value? And that, I think, is the most important thing that I got from it. The idea that, yeah, sure, money is cool, but is money cool if you're doing a job you hate and you're spending most of your days working on that job? No. For me, obviously, I want to be able to do something that I enjoy doing every day. And if that means taking a pay cut, I'm willing to do it. Ironically, sometimes following your, that passion can lead to even more money. But I always believed, and I still believe, that I would be much happier having a job I like with enough money than having a job I hate with tons of money, right? Like, to me, happiness is something that comes from doing what you love and not just getting stuff, buying stuff like that.
Yeah, it's not following kind of the safe path, right? Because a lot of times something that may appear safe and luxurious at the beginning, just for the sake of getting a job, finding stability, may not be the best thing. And, a lot of people go to university to find stability after in their life. But kind of like what we talked about before, I agree that, right, this kind of stable life, the idea of, having enough money to be taken care of fully, and even living this kind of, having enough money to live kind of gluttonously, I think is not the best thing, right? Being able to kind of either chase that dream or just take time to kind of wander, right? Or you think of like the book On the Road by Jack Kerouac. It's all about like those characters in the book. They don't really know what it is, right? They don't really know what they're chasing. They're just chasing it. And really, university, I think, should kind of be the same thing, right? We don't really know what we're necessarily after. We're just going through this journey and we're experiencing different things, and we're stopping here, we're stopping there. And I think, the pause that is university can be taken as a great template for life, really, right? Like we shouldn't, once we get a certain job or at a certain accomplishment, just be like, okay, I found it, right? I'm satisfied now. I could die right now. It's like it should just be one stop on this journey that, we may at times think we know what it is that we're chasing, but even myself, like it's something that I'm struggling with big time right now, is this idea of like, what am I actually in love with, in terms of like what will provide me with that sort of passion in my life. And really, I'm right now I'm getting to the point I'm like, is there even something that will permanently remain as this kind of passion, this position of passion for me, or will it always change? Or is life just about, going through different experiences rather than having that one passion and just following it the whole time, right? I remember one of my professors at university, very respected professor that I had, she confided in me one day. She's like, Ryan, I question whether this is the job for me. Like, am I doing the right thing? Am I making a difference? Is this what life is about? And I'm like, wow, first of all, like, that's very honest to confide in me because I'm just your student. But like, secondly, I'm like, wow, like someone who I thought at the beginning of my undergrad, who was a first year professor, like someone who I thought had it all together, whatever that meant, really I saw her vulnerable right there. And like, it's like, yeah, we never have our stuff together. Right. And it's okay to be like, question whether we're doing the best thing for ourselves and whether it's time for a change.
Yeah, and that's part of growing up too, right? I always assumed as a kid, parents got it figured out, adults got it figured out, my teachers got it figured out. But yeah, one of the great things about university, especially graduate school, was figuring out no one's got it figured out. Everyone's in the process of figuring it out in their own way. And for me, that's a huge realization. Like, you don't have to know for sure exactly what you're doing right now. Like, I have a plan and I'm carrying it out, but true confidence is knowing like, okay, if that plan like doesn't work out at all, I'll be fine. I'll figure out a way. And you might not always know exactly where you'll end up or how, but just having faith that it will work out, and living by your principles, whatever they are, living by your own morals. I feel like that's, for now, what I think like the key to life is: going after something you want, following your own principles, and being okay if it doesn't work out, because it's better to try than to wonder your whole life, hey, what if I actually tried to do that thing I always wanted to do?
Yeah, it's almost the idea of like we keep on just to keep on. Now, I mean, I think something unique to us, we were humanities majors.
Yes.
Right. So we success for us, as we kind of hinted at, it was about marks at times, but it was also about, for myself at least, being transformed by what I was reading. That was really important to me. Like I remember when I first took a literary theory class, like that really opened up my mind, because I started not just reading differently, but reading my world differently. So really it affected the way I lived. And I think that's something, being a successful student means, being able to take what you learn and it's something that applies to your life. You're able to apply it to your life. There's
yes,
a practical side of it.
100%.
Yes. But and I think that's important, right? But something I wonder about, and I just have no experience in this because I'm from the humanities background. A lot of people argue, right, humanities background is the best education to have for a transformative education. I just wonder, and I'd love to have maybe in the future someone who's in kind of a STEM-based background, whether it be math or science, talking about what success meant for them, because I'm sure their background very different from ours.
Exactly.
Right?
We're totally coming from a biased situation,
Yes.
right? Because yeah, we don't have that, and we're not like trying to undermine any other thing. But
I'm just curious.
But that is what I find valuable about our humanities education. Definitely, that we changes the way we look at the world. Right? It didn't just give us marks. It actually made us kind of look and live our lives differently. These books we read, these ideas we heard, which to me is like the most impressive thing about university.
Yeah, and even myself right now, I joke around with people and I say that like I feel that I'm going through my own kind of second round of university in the sense that like I've created my own kind of syllabus. I'm trying to really think through a lot of either the texts that I studied in university or new texts I didn't get to. I'm trying to really think of their practical use. And so, yeah, like I think, the idea of being a student never ends, right? I think we're always students. And I try to say that in my teaching, like I'm a student as well. I'm a student of, English. I'm a student of philosophy, a student of music, student of self-development. So like,
yeah, for sure.
I think that's something that doesn't end when you graduate.
Yeah. And like, I'm even a student of YouTube, I'm a student of business. I'm a student of all of this stuff that I do. I don't ever think anyone reaches a point where they can't learn anymore. It's a constant process. And yeah, like we were talking about, I remember reading a book similar to On the Road in that sense, but like Tropic of Cancer. And the writer was spending time, I believe it was in Paris, and it was like in complete poverty. And yet there was comedy, right? There was enjoying life. There was a lot of interesting moments there. And I think with that book, it really clicked to me that, money is not that important. Obviously, to a certain extent of money, you need to survive. But I'm reading Seneca right now and on the shortness of life. And he also says, money can really work against you. It can make you, there's a story about a guy who's carried around by his servants, and he had to ask his servants if he's standing or sitting down. Like, when you're that removed from what you're doing, are you even living? Is that even called life? Like, are you really getting joy from all of your luxuries? And it's true. Like, I feel like adversity, oftentimes, even me being a refugee and coming here and, English being my second language, I feel like that can actually become a strength, and that can actually, make you not feel entitled, which is something very important, I think, because today, like you said, school is becoming like a business, and that's talked about in the book. And I did experience a lot of students who did act entitled. They're like, the professor should do this, I paid for this, blah, 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 like that kind of mentality.
Well, even think of the website Rate My Professor.
Yeah,
that's all it's about,
yeah.
Right? It's about like ranking people either because you thought they were worth the money of the course or you thought they weren't worth the money of the course.
And you can like argue that stuff, people will look at different areas and stuff like that. But yeah, but in the classroom itself, like you should give some kind of respect to the professor. That's my opinion. Like there's all the rage of like, equal relationships in the sense that the student is equal to the teacher and they're like learning from each other. And that is true. The teacher definitely learns from the student. But at the same time, I mean, I think there should be some kind of respect and trust placed in the professor because of their expertise, because of their years of studying this. And I feel like, in my view, what I experienced in my undergrad was too many students were treating it like a business, and that the professor, like they were doing them a commercial service and didn't show them the respect I think they deserved. And I think that's definitely something that stood out to me. And I would never do that because, I think because of my background, because I have to struggle a lot in different areas, I don't have that sense of entitlement, like, oh, the professor should bend to my will,
Sure. Like I remember my one professor telling me a lot of times he was like, one time he was late and he said it was because I was like negotiating a sale of a mark with a student. It was like the student's like, I deserve 2% higher, and he's like, why? And then they're going back and forth. I'm just like, is that really what success is about?
Yeah, it's so interesting. And like and it's like not like you learn more by like getting 2% higher.
No.
And I also heard a student bragging before. Obviously, we're not going to mention any names, but it was a older student than me, and I was kind of like looking at him like, he's where I'm going to be in like 2 years or whatever. Because we were taking in university. One of the cool things is you get to be in courses with older students that are further along, and I was like talking to him, and he's like, yeah, I can always get my professors to raise my mark at least like 2%, and it's like. Now looking back, it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like it's 2%. But the best when like I had obviously periods of fading in and out of, oh, I need the mark, I want to get a good mark, and enjoying just learning. And I think the best experience and when I enjoyed school the most was when I actually focused on, hey, what am I here for? I'm here to learn. I'm here to absorb as much knowledge as possible. And when I focused on that and less on the marks, which would come inevitably if you are focusing on the process, that's when I enjoyed school the most, and that's when I got the most out of it. But when it starts being a game of, I'm going to take this course because I heard the professor gives easy marks, that's when you start going down the wrong line. And for me personally, I always made sure to pick courses that really sounded interesting to me and not just what I heard are what they call bird courses or like courses to get like easy A's in.
Yeah. And I admit a little bit in my beginning of my undergrad, I was like that. I tried to at times balance on my schedule with quote unquote bird courses. But yeah, I mean, I found that second half of my master's when I really started caring about the process more. Education and even writing, like I remember writing my final paper, became something that was like pleasurable because I didn't care about the outcome. I just cared about the process, and not just the process of writing it, but I also thought of it in terms of like what is this teaching me about life, right? It's like I'm kind of like taking the time to not just revise this piece of writing and work on it, but I'm also working on myself and revising myself.
Exactly. So, like you're building those skills. Those skills are by far like one of the most important things you get in university. Like right now, like I said, I've been writing every day at least an hour, sometimes more, for 107 days in a row now. So like through that process, I've come up with, a lot of scripts for videos that have done really well, made like a good amount of money. And literally we had some of the record breaking days on YouTube in the last few months because of that process change. But really, I'm telling myself, it's not about the results. They will come inevitably, but it's about the process. And I'm so much more happier with who I am now that I do that every day, when I used to be a person who I couldn't really respect myself because I didn't actually do what I knew I should be doing. But now that I actually sit down, I write, I work on the business, we wake up in the morning, we go for a run, ran 10K today, which is awesome. Like the old me, could not say that I started the morning by waking up at 4:30 and running 10K. And these changes snowballed into something amazing. And in a lot of ways, the fact that I could stick to writing every day for 107 days helps me build all these other habits, right? It's an important keystone habit that's helped me keep up with meditation, which for the first time I'm at like 90 days in a row, which is like the best it's ever been. So like I'm in an awesome place right now. And in a lot of ways, this kind of developing these habits started in my university and specifically my master's, where I was like, all right, you know what? I'm almost done here. I have a job with YouTube. If this doesn't work out well, I'm just going to focus on, enjoying the process, getting through it, trust that I'll get through it. And yeah, and I actually wrote, I think it was 7 days in a row on my thesis. And to me, at that point in time, I was like, oh my God, I wrote 7 days in a row. It was like the biggest deal. And now I've come to 107 days. So definitely school has developed those skills in me, those habits of discipline that are invaluable now in my business.
Sure. And I think that's the toughest part about leaving school and what I struggle with, right? The idea of like, you don't have that structure anymore. You have to do everything. You don't have someone telling you to complete something, right? And for a lot of people, that puts them into a tough situation, really like they're faced with this kind of identity crisis, like, okay, like no one's holding up that hoop anymore, like I have to put all the hoops in front of me now. What do I do, right? I have to go my own path now. I don't have someone telling me, okay, you have to hand this in next week. So, and I'm sure next week we're going to talk more about like the post secondary, that idea of pursuing things after school and the difficulties
should we just
of doing
mention the
that.
topic?
Sure.
Yeah, so tomorrow's topic, not tomorrow, next week's topic is going to be like unconventional career paths, the part 1 of it. And then we're going to do the book club the following week. And we're going to talk about the War of Art. And then we're going to do a part 2 of unconventional career paths. So we got some interesting stuff. And as long as everything goes according to plan, we should have 2 guests for each of the career paths options. And obviously I'll share my own insights from YouTube, but we'll also be asking from the experts we bring in about their experience, and it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And remember, if you haven't started, get reading Stephen Pressfield's War of Art.
Changed my life, people. Changed my life.
Even if, take his advice when he talks about just putting in a little bit of work every day, even if it's just reading a short chapter a day before you go to bed, just start digging away at it. And it's a short book. It won't take you long. And that way, when you listen to the podcast in a couple weeks, you'll be able to hopefully think about some of the ideas we're talking about. And, always feel free to comment on our videos about anything that you're thinking that you want us to share, because we definitely want to hear from you. And we really want to nurture and develop that seminar type environment. That's why we're having
we're missing that. We're having seminar withdrawals.
Yes, we're having a couple guests on so we could branch out the talk a little bit more and be able to have more perspectives, which is always great. So if you haven't started, get on that book. For sure. Any last words, Igor?
No, thank you so much for listening.
For sure. Yeah, we'll see you next week.
See ya.